Welcome to the DEI Disrupters podcast, a podcast where we talk about everything diversity, equity, and inclusion by bringing the top positively disruptive voices in the DEI industry here to tell their stories every first and third Tuesday of the month. I'm your host, Dr. Britney Scott, a DEI disruptor in my own right, a physician, a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and the owner and CEO of a DEI process improvement consulting firm. Well, that's enough about me. Let's jump right in and hear from our guests. Hello, everybody. And I am so excited to be on our first episode of the DEI Disruptors. Today with me, I have 6 phenomenal DEI disruptors that I feel so grateful to know, so grateful to have a part of my network, so grateful to be able to call colleagues. And I'm excited for you guys to meet them too. So I would love if we start off with introductions. So if you could give your name, what you do, and your favorite leadership quote or positive affirmation. And we'll start with Kevin, and I'll move down my screen.
Sure. So my name is Kevin Frick. I'm a health economist who does a lot of work on cost effectiveness with equity issues at the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School and School of Public Health. While I've read a lot of leadership things and could think of a quote, I like to actually think about what the purpose in life that I have written up on my board has been for the past 2 years. And that's empower authentic pursuit of purposefully defined success. And that really determines how I live out my leadership life, especially working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. Thank you.
Love that. How about you, Dr. Masood?
Hi, Rashad Masood. I'm an improver. I work on making healthcare better, and I've done that in a number of places, number of capacities. My formal capacity right now is as a visiting faculty at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. And I guess my favorite leadership quote, it's the one that I use all the time. It's if we continue to do what we're doing, we will continue to get the results we're getting. If we want different results, we have to do something different that enables us to get them.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Masood. How about you, Dr. Fitzpatrick? You're on mute.
Okay, I see now. I am Kristen Fitzpatrick, and I'm the founder of a DEI firm here in Memphis, Tennessee. And we provide education and leadership development focused on anti-racism to healthcare professionals to just bridge that gap to bring more self-awareness because that's a huge issue. Mindset shifts, speaking services, workshops, facilitation, you name it, we do it. And my favorite quote is people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will not forget how you made them feel. And I think that it's so important just working in this space.
I love that. 1,000%. I'm such a big fan of that quote. And what about you, Rudy?
Well, first of all, it's just good to be here. And this is quite a panel of people you have put together, Brittany. So thanks for the invitation to be included. My name is Rudy Nickens. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a partner in the firm of Evolution Team. We are a group of consultants and executive coaches. And my work within Evolution is to lead the DEI activities within the organization. That has been my sweet spot, my heart work, my passion for. I usually say since I had hair, so that's how long I've been. I saw a picture recently. I said, "Oh, you had hair doing that talk." So that's my answer right now. I don't have a particular quote. I have a lot of values that I hold up, but I think the thing that follows me most through my work is the quote that Audre Lorde proffered around intersectionality that said there is no hierarchy of oppression. It's always a mistake to rank them and to look at the connections between each other. I think that's a value that I hold. And then my personal commitment is I hope beyond my fears and I work beyond my hopes. And that is what I try to live out every day in my life. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rudy. And how about you, Dr. Defoe?
Well, I'm an OBGYN. I'm presently the medical director at Innovation Health here in the Washington, D.C. area. But I'm also board certified in preventive medicine and public health. I've worked in occupational medicine. And, you know, throughout my medical career, I have seen so much injustice. And after I took this training during COVID at Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, I realized there was so much that I did not know. So I actually co-founded the Johns Hopkins Health Equity Group with a group of other alumni. And we've been going strong for 2 years, having monthly meetings. Dr. Kevin Frick has been joining us. And then I said, you know, there is something greater I need to do. And after taking that course at Harvard with Dr. Fleming last year, I co-founded another organization where we are focusing on clinicians in the pipeline at every level. How can we improve equity all along the way? So I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for joining me. I do have lots of favorite quotes. I see Dr. Masood talk about Peter Demings, right? About in that space of quality and improvement. But I also like Carl Lewis, where it's always the right time to do right. Mm. I love that. And Martin Luther King said, you know, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice. And so that's why we're here. I did not want to be a bystander. I wanted to take action.
Awesome. And action, you're taking a lot of action, Dr. Defoe, and I'm really looking forward to people hearing a little bit more about what you're doing. How about you, Dr. Fleming?
Well, good evening. Thank you again for having us. I think this is an exciting place to be. I, like Dr. Defoe, I'm also an OBGYN, and I think we're busybodies by nature, so we like to wear multiple hats. But the few things that I am currently doing, as we've mentioned, I'm the director of the Leadership Development Program to advance health equity in healthcare, and that's housed at the Harvard TH School of Public Health. I'm president of Reed Scholars, which is a nonprofit composed of physicians and dentists committed to health equity, both collectively and in our independent careers. And I'm also just recently changed positions to be the senior vice president of health equity accountability at Kiowa Care, which is a maternal health startup that's based in West Philadelphia, which tries to bridge the gap between traditional prenatal care and the social determinants of health. So my quote, not a quote either, but more every journey starts with a single step. And I think sometimes this work can be overwhelming and daunting. But, you know, if we all get in there and just try to do our little bit, we can hope move the needle one day at a time. So
I love that. Well, so I am Dr. Britney Scott. I am the CEO of The Clinic Doctor, and I am a physician by background. And I am also now the host of the DEI Disrupters podcast. I am so excited to have you all here. I'm sure that everybody just getting a glimpse into your introductions knows that this is going to be a Power Pack podcast. And so I'm excited to jump right in, starting with health equity. Literally, when I thought about what brought all of you guys together through your various views of the world, your various experiences, it all boils down to health equity. And so I wanted to understand what you guys believe is the way to actually achieving health equity. And anybody can start.
Don't be a bystander, you know. You can't see injustice and turn or close your eyes. You know, you have to take up the first step. How can you help? So you need to be aware that it's occurring, right? I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, Dr. Fitzpatrick?
And I think too, not that we want to sit in the past, but I think it's important to understand the past because so much of this is rooted in past practices and policies that have just burdened an entire group of people. So I think it's very, very, very important to take a look at those past practices and policies as well, so that we can move forward and dismantle the things that are currently in place and make sure that we don't make the same mistakes moving forward as we continue to do this work, even, you know, us.
I want to add to appreciate what you just said, Dr. Fitzpatrick. I think in the DEI space, we are finally getting to the place where the E matters. And we have to really look at the root causes of why the disparities exist in our communities in the first place. We have been unwilling to do that. We have not been able to say, generations and generations and generations of disparate behaviors and opportunities and lack of access to benefits and privileges and resources have led us to this place where the gap is so wide that the solutions required for anything, health or any other inequities, require really understanding that and being able to fashion the new, fresh, creative response to what we can do to make things better.
And I'll build on that. When I think about this issue, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and sometimes we add belonging. And in my view, one of the things that has to happen is for everyone to feel like they belong in the conversation. We have to meet people where they are, understand them, be radically compassionate, and try and understand, as people have said, not just where they are, but what got them there in the first place in order to help them move forward and improve their health.
So one of the things I've noticed in working on health inequity is that sometimes it's not that clear that there is an inequity, and we have to actually look for it. And so one way that I've been doing that with my colleagues addressing this is to take outcomes of interest and then stratify them by different potential causes of inequity. So you can think of many, like race, ethnicity, age, gender, geographic location. Others, depending on where we are, the context will determine what are potential causes of inequity. And then you look at all the patients concerned, but for whom you have that outcome, and you stratify by these different causes. And if you find that there is a difference, then that's something that we've identified an inequity that then we can go after and start to figure out. I'll stop here, but I can continue this theme throughout the conversation. But to me, it's actually, sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's there, you can see it, and sometimes it's hidden. And we can also talk about the reasons, but let me stop here for a minute.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree. I think everybody said everything that needs to be said, but I was just going to underscore the historical aspect and the fact that all of our humanity is wrapped up together. So we have to work on this as a collective, and it's not a singular group of people's problems. It's everybody's problem. And at the beginning, everybody has to give each other grace in order to work through it. So I think just bringing back that humanity aspect and recognizing all of ourselves as humans and starting there.
I definitely, I love everything that you all have said. I think that I'm very similar to Dr. Masood. He has like a process improvement background as well as like the healthcare background. And that's exactly where my mind goes. I love data and objectivity. How do we take the subjectivity out of things like health inequity? How do we take the person out of that, where it's not person dependent, but it's data dependent, where it's process dependent, where it's system dependent? I think that that's really the key to health equity. I think that a lot of times when we allow it to be, oh, I have this, doctor today or this nurse today, and therefore I'm going to get this treatment, or maybe I won't, or, however it goes, I think that we leave a big gap when it comes on to equity, when we don't have processes in place that, regardless of bias, which we all have, if we're human, regardless of bias, regardless of any prejudice, all of that kind of stuff, that we have a process in place that is data driven, that allows us to make, consistent, continuous improvement in this area.
It's interesting, your comment, thinking about data. There's so many different pieces of data. Are we looking at life expectancy? Are we looking at the incidence of certain diseases? Are we looking at life expectancy without significant disability or frailty? And I think one thing that I think about is we really want all the measures to be as close as possible, if not the same, to end health inequities. But which do we prioritize first? Where do we set our goals first? And what's most important to the groups that we're trying to help become less marginalized and, in fact, not marginalized at all?
And that's a tough question when we're talking about health. That's a really tough question. And even thinking about the fact that this extends far out of, the hospital. Rudy, you have a background in helping during the AIDS epidemic, and that your story with that, when you think about, I have a friend who he was a lawyer out in South Africa, and he worked with the intersection between equity and tuberculosis and racism and that whole space. And one of you guys I was talking to recently about the intersection between environmentalism and race and gender and all of that, socioeconomic status. And when we think about health equity, it's such a huge topic. It's such a huge topic, and it gets really complex because when you think about it, Kevin, how do we choose? How do we prioritize when we're talking about human lives? How do we pick which one is most important and which one is least? It's a tough thing, but it's so great to have leaders like yourself that are starting the conversation, and that are not just starting the conversation, but pushing forward when it comes on to making change.
And to add just a tiny bit, I think the key is not to assume that we as leaders know what's right for the marginalized populations, but to go and ask them and engage with them and talk with them and ask what's most important to them that we can work on, because they probably have most of the solutions already. We just need to ask and find out.
That's right. That's right. The voice of the customer, right? As we learn in Six Sigma and Lean.
If I can go back to your the comment you made earlier, Kevin, what do we look at? We look at everything. But I think sometimes, I look at it and I say, of course, life expectancy is probably the most impressive one, because that tells you a lot. But can I work on life expectancy? Probably, I'm not in the position where I can affect that. So I look at, and that's just being pragmatic. I say, okay, what is within my sphere of influence that I can do that would contribute to this huge cause that we're all working for? And so, for example, I'm working, helping delivery systems. Well, if that's what I'm doing, then I can take an indicator of something that we're working on with them and work through that. Now, if I were in a different place, like in government, where I could affect higher level indicators, that would be, my choice would be very different. But I really think that it is important for everybody to understand, okay, what is my sphere of influence, and what is the best thing I can do to contribute to this?
Awesome. So I want to go ahead and move on to the next question, because it's another big one. Talking about DEI and the bottom line. This is a conversation that I love to have with DEI practitioners, because there's two sides of the aisle, right? There's some people who say, DEI and the bottom line, that's offensive. Why should it be about business when it's just the right thing to do? But on the other side, there's so many executives that are here right now who they believe that DEI matters. They believe that they want to be allies. They want to make change. But when they're thinking about allocating resources, when they're thinking about, I'm going to put this money here instead of there, I think that it makes it really difficult if we don't have a discussion about DEI and the bottom line. But I want to discuss with you all. I want to hear what your thoughts are and what's the importance or what are the dangers of thinking about DEI in conjunction with the bottom line.
Well, I guess as the business school person, I'll start, but certainly don't want to dominate the conversation. I think it's key to remember two things. One, if everyone feels like they belong, if everyone feels like they don't have to explain themselves all the time, don't have to use mental energy to figure out how to fit in, and can just be their authentic selves in the workplace, then they can put their energy toward the business, and that will definitely help the bottom line. So that's one reason that top level executives should be thinking about how to make sure that everyone working in their organization does feel like they belong, does feel like they're included, and can contribute to the organization. But I never would want to have it only there. We do have to remember that it is just right. There is a moral argument for it. And I would hate to have it only saying, well, we're only going to do this if it does improve the bottom line and we can measure our return on investment. We should do it just because, but recognize that there are so many ways in which it can directly, as well as very indirectly, affect a business's ability to get the job done.
And I think over the decades, we have made some progress from doing this because of shareholder value. That was the original hook for businesses, right? That, you know, you could have a larger share of the market for your product if you embrace this, that customers are looking for businesses that value diversity, that employees are looking for companies that value diversity. And that's still real and true. But I think we have moved from that a bit to recognizing that businesses have an authority and have an ability to really change the world and shape the culture around us. And if we can work with business leaders to elevate their consciousness about this work, that we could have, you know, people whose sphere of influence is largely, you know, much more than any of our individual ones were. So it's about really getting into the minds and hearts and practices of business, because a lot of people's world will be moved by that. And it's not just about, you know, the economic benefits of it. And that's still true, but I don't think that's really what we're thinking about it these days.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking of when you asked that question, Dr. Yeli Aluko, he's the medical director of Ernst & Young, and he presented at the Minority Health Summit on October 5th this year, earlier, and he made a business case for it. It was impressive. But, you know, I'm thinking also, let's do a SWOT analysis, right? And look at some of the opportunities for including everyone, so everyone feels that they belong to this organization. And what are the threats if we don't? So we have to, I mean, the bottom line is important, of course, like everything else, you know, it's a business, but you know, we are not thriving, right? There are people in the organization that's not thriving. And to get employee engagement, people have to work at their highest and their truest self, right? And that's how I think about it. So when you have a medical resident on call, is this resident performing at its highest potential? Is he or she thriving? Because if he or she is not thriving as a resident or a physician, then we have a quality problem in terms of patient safety, right? So when the Institute of Medicine came out to err is human, and we have not moved so far, right? So they found out that there are 440,000 preventable deaths every year in the US because of patient safety issues, and it's a systemic problem. Well, I'm sure if the Institute of Medicine had begin to focus on physician wellness, nurses, you know, medical assistants, and those who provide care to patients, we would see a great improvement. You know, change the system in which we function, and the outcome of, you know, quality improvement and patient safety would be greatly improved.
I love it. You know, you're preaching to the choir here. But Dr. Defoe, what does on call look like? I know that you talked about being on call, but what does that actually mean, and how does that impact resident wellness?
Well, medicine is difficult anywhere you go, right? Whether you are a white male, white female, or any other race, black male, black female. But to have this added, burden of being a black male, or being a white female, or being a queer, or someone of a certain religion because they wear a certain outfit for their religion, it's an extra unnecessary burden. And I'm always thinking about prevention. How can we eliminate preventable things, right? That's how we have to think, right? You elimination and substitute it with something better. So it's in public health and occupational medicine, we think about it's a framework: elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and then we think of PPE, right? Personal protective equipment. And if you think in that order, because this is evidence-based, you'll be amazed how the outcome can be so great. Why don't we want to be great? we have an opportunity to be great. I say, let's do it.
1,000%. Any other thoughts?
I was just going to say that I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and I think we should encourage people to do the right things for the right reasons, and it's the morally and ethically right thing to do. But I think history tells us that sometimes we have to be pushed along the way to get to catch up with what the right thing is to do. And I think that comes with attaching some types of, some of it is data, but also in thinking about the healthcare system in general, attaching reimbursement to quality outcomes, right? So pushing people with financial disincentives. But I mean, and as Dr. Defoe was talking about, thinking from a public health lens, and I use lots of public health examples, but one of them is smoking, right? Like people quit smoking because there were consequences attached to smoking, right? Not because it was good for their health. They got there, and now people don't take up the habit as often. But when we had to push people, we had to tax them, right? And outlaw smoking inside and outlaw smoking in the workplace. And so I think that the systemic policies and procedures have to push people in the direction to do the right thing. I think when we can't just wait for people to be nice and treat everybody better. We won't get there very fast that way.
Yeah, I don't think we need an act of Congress to say, can we please be kind?
So, Brittany, listening to all of this, this idea came to my mind that way back when I first started in improving healthcare, we would make improvements, and the question would come up, well, how do we know that, this isn't costing us more? How do we know that, at what price are we getting this? And it basically instigated us to start quantifying the economic effects of the improvements. Now, we've done many of them, and invariably, what we found is this: wherever we have produced good clinical outcomes from the improvement, and we've quantified the economic effect, we've actually been able to save money rather than spend more money. It's become a rule that we almost stopped. Every now and then somebody will do it, but we don't do as many nowadays, just because it's, you understand that basically we're eliminating unnecessary work, we're eliminating rework, we're reducing the costs of poor care, we're doing only the right thing and getting the results. So all of those together do produce a reduction. Now, you just gave me the idea that, well, this is probably something that we should be doing now, like go back to a health equity issue that we've addressed and quantify the economic effect of doing that. What does that get us? I haven't done it yet, but I'm pretty confident we're going to see something very similar.
That's right. I'm thinking in terms of expenses. Think of the expenses employees who are discriminated against have to go through, right? Through the equal employment opportunity process, which I do not believe in at all. I mean, this is one of the most horrendous experiences for anyone. mentally, financially. And when we take all these costs together, we're not thriving. Why don't we want to thrive?
1,000%. So I am very big, especially when we think about health, but actually I'm going to want to jump to you, Rudy, because you're one of the DI practitioners here that, go way outside of healthcare. And I want to hear your perspective. But from a healthcare perspective, there's so many ways that DEI affects the bottom line. First of all, our hospitals are literally filled with travel nurses right now. And that's a DEI problem. That's a DEI problem. I know that we like to just put it into HR as a whole. It's not. It's specifically a DEI problem. Your nurses are leaving and coming back, and you're paying them 3 times the amount, and then hospitals are closing. And so when we think about the cost of turnover, literally, like, in between like 2015 or 2016 and 2021, the cost of turnover just because of race, literally just because of race, was $171.9 billion in the United States. When you think about that, we're not even talking about disability. We're not talking about gender and sexuality and sexual orientation. We're not talking about, like, there's so many things. We're not talking about religion. We're not talking about age. We're literally just talking about race and ethnicity. And it's cost the United States so much money. And that shouldn't be why we do it. But if your conscience can't tell you to do it, at least look at the numbers. If you can't feel like it's such a moral imperative, at least realize that it's also a business imperative. When we think about, also, obviously, when we start talking about going to a value-based care system and how much that is, the money that's associated with that, when we do the right thing, when we take care of patients equally, when we do what our jobs are to do, and we heal, then ultimately we save money. And there shouldn't have to be any type of governmental incentives to make us take care of patients properly. There shouldn't have to be, but there are. And so, like, and even still, right? Even with the incentives, we're still not doing our parts. When I'm out of the hospital at the moment, but being in the hospital, oh my goodness, you watch people, marginalized populations, drop through the cracks like nobody's business. And I'm such a firm believer that we should not need advocates. There's no reason that I should need an advocate for you to do your job, for you to do right by me, for you to honor the oath that you took, right? There shouldn't be any reason why I need an advocate, but we do. And when we don't have advocates, they just drop through the cracks. Don't let them look like me. Don't let them sound like me. they're at the bottom of the ocean by then. So I think that DEI and the bottom line is a touchy subject for a lot of people, because it's like, well, it shouldn't be this way. Why should you have to look at the bottom line to make a change, to do better, to do right by other humans? Especially when we talk about areas like healthcare, but we do. And I guess to close up this little section, I want to hear from you, Rudy. I want to know what your experience looks like when you think about DEI and the bottom line in a non-healthcare space.
Well, I don't know how to follow you when you say all that. My goodness, and any part of adding a man's voice on top of that would be just wrong. So let me just say that first. And now let me just share with you a little bit of the philosophy that guides our business philosophy around this. So our firm, we believe that businesses and the leaders who lead them have the power to change the world first. And we believe that business is the leverage point for global change. And that is the place already writing history in the next chapter. We also believe that thoughtful and intentional growth in the heart and mind of the leader, in the team and the culture and the organization and the product itself is the greatest and most sustainable impact we can be had. And then finally, we believe in stewarding global transformation through business beyond ordinary business. So that's the mindset that we think. It's not about just about growing wealth for the businesses, but using the absolute people go into business for many reasons, not just to make money. Most people have a vision, have a heart, have a passion, want to do something to change the world. And why not teach people, give people a chance to develop this lens of equity that guides how they do that. And when Kevin talked about belonging, is probably one of the most important challenges that most businesses have right now. We don't lose people because of salaries. We don't lose people, and we lose people because of culture. We lose people because they don't find themselves valued, represented, seen, cared about, understood within the organization. So that's one of the reasons that businesses do that. They'll make money, but that's not the reason for it.
I love that. And Brene Brown, she has this quote where she's, and it's not even just a quote. She did actual research on it. And she said that based on her research, the opposite of belonging is fitting in. And that really hit me, where I have to put on a mask. I have to put on my cloak of something that doesn't look or sound like me in order for me to be accepted in my workplace. And I think that what you said, Rudy, rings so true in this idea of you don't lose people because of money, because of all that stuff. People are trying to figure out, doing all this research of, what do employees really want? It's to go to work and feel like, oh, I belong here. Oh, yeah. I enjoy this. Oh, I feel good. I don't feel demeaned and underrated and all types of stuff. Like, I feel good here. But okay, guys, we have 5 minutes for the next two questions. What do you find to be the biggest challenge that you've experienced in working in DEI?
I think for me, my biggest challenge working in DEI is holding that space for myself, like creating that white space for me, not getting, I don't want to say so involved, but to the point to where I'm not taking that time for myself, because, like you said, we're doing the work and still having these experiences at the same time. And that racial trauma can be so overwhelming at times. It can feel so heavy, especially when I think someone mentioned earlier about, it being left on a certain group of people and not the collective. So when you feel like that, it can be so overwhelming. So I think the biggest challenge for me is creating and saving space for myself.
Wow, that's pretty much what I was going to say. I mean, I remember taking that course at Harvard last year, and Dr. Fleming, you probably remember, right? She's one of the speakers up in Ohio said, we want to be the DEI queen or king. And we have to stop and take care of ourselves. I mean, especially for people like us. I'm an OBGYN. I think I can do everything, right? I have patients scheduled all day, but guess what? I'm on call for the labor and delivery. I'm on call for the emergency room, right? So I'm seeing a patient and someone calls me for a stat C-section. I have to go, right? And then there is a ruptured ectopic in the emergency room. I have to do this, and I have patients in the waiting room. So that's how we practice as physicians. So my eyes are like, I want everything, right? So it's like I'm entering it's like a kid in a candy store. I just want it all. So I have to put time aside for myself, and that is so important. But I think the nice thing also with that challenge is that I have so many people around me who are always willing to support what I do. And I think that is encouraging for me.
Wow. Y'all badasses. I'm just gonna say that. and then I will add what I think for myself is the challenge is, sometimes we just underestimate how deeply embedded and systemic the forces that we're trying to interrupt are, and that they are committed to doing whatever they can to keep themselves going forward. So the idea that we have arrived is the biggest thing. The DEI moment represents our best thinking today, but we have so much more to figure out in this space. Represents the best thinking of a whole lot of people at the moment, but please, we have not arrived where we need to be. We need to continuously be vigilant about learning and growing and interrupting the amorphous changes that happen, because racism does not want it to go away. So we have to be thoughtful and work hard about it. And I love that. I mean, it's both challenge, but it's also exciting to me as well. Like, it's a chance to just keep thinking. And I'll hold what you both just said about self-care as an important thing that I will admit to often forgetting. So that is an important reminder. Thank you.
I would say for me, the interesting question is, given that I am not in a marginalized group, how do I support without imposing what my views are, and making sure that I'm as supportive as possible, and remembering that it's about supporting and amplifying, and using the privilege I have to amplify and bring about change that's desired, as opposed to thinking that I know what's right for everyone else.
I think one of the challenges I'm seeing now is with the elevation of the importance of DEI in every organization, just about. The difference between what people say and how they behave, that gap is the most challenging thing, because now people are saying all the right words, but not necessarily taking the actions that correspond to those words. And I think this is a huge challenge we will be facing for a long time.
I think that I was going to say something else, but it's the other thing that we talk about a lot is the creation of the DEI offices like around the country and all these organizations, but not having not backing them up with the support of the leadership or resources, and making the office one person, which just heightens, talk about self-care. If you're the only person in the office in the whole administration and you are the DEI king or queen, that just it probably makes it worse instead of better. But the other thing I was going to say around DEI, we were talking about words and vocabulary and not equating diversity to equity. And just because everybody looks different doesn't mean that they're not just there fitting in and assimilating to the culture that's not actually trying to tackle equity, inclusion, and belonging, because that's where the change happens. So we can understand diversity is just numbers, right? Those are demographics, but to do the work, we got to keep going down the alphabet. So just being mindful of that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that brought a thought to my head in the sense of, if we truly have equity and inclusion, diversity takes care of itself. You don't have to fight as hard for diversity. If we truly have a culture that is based in equity and inclusion. I also wanted to kind of close up this section by mentioning just with all the work that I do, I talk to a ton of like chief diversity officers and people in similar positions. And I've heard it break down into 4 parts. I'm a data person. I'm a Lean Six Sigma kind of girl. So I take it and I stratify my data, and I've kind of gotten these 4 buckets. So we start off with buy-in. So whether that's executive buy-in or employee buy-in, but especially executive buy-in. So many people, again, George Floyd happened. These companies said, oh gosh, they were so scared. They're like, we have to do something. Let's get ourselves a chief diversity officer and put their face up there. And they look a little, something, they add a little color to our soup. And they said, well, that's it, right? But they missed the why. They completely missed the why they're doing this. Why do you have that position? And it's tends to be sometimes even harder to be a chief diversity officer where the company doesn't know the why you're there than if you weren't there at all. Because you have no power, you have no resources, you have no anything. You're just a face in a one-man band. The second thing that I've noticed is where to begin. I find a lot of people are in these inaugural roles because Again, they just started this. You just got these chief diversity officers in the past 2 years. COVID is older than chief diversity officers a lot of times. So you just got these chief diversity officer positions, and they don't know where to start. They have no clue. They're taking these diverse, experiences, and they're trying to figure out, well, where do I begin? Then the next thing that I've noticed is, how do I actually get results? That's been a really difficult thing for a lot of DEI practitioners is, well, okay, I'm here. I finally have buy-in. I finally know where to start, but then I've started and nothing's changing. The environment is still toxic and biased and hateful. What do I do? And there aren't any like formal, DEI degrees that tell you exactly how to do this. So people are just stuck. And then the last boat, which I rarely find, I've probably found, realistically, I found one person that's been in this boat. One lady that I spoke to recently, actually, and it's okay. Well, I kind of have all that said, and I'm starting to gain some momentum, but then what next? How do I keep this momentum up? I have a whole role. I'm chief diversity officer. I can't end with one thing. Where do I go next, and how do I keep improving? And I love what you said, Dr. Masood, in terms of using that data to guide us, to find the inequities, to be able to understand, what our next move should be. So I want to, did you have something, Kevin?
Just a very quick thing to
Go
add.
on.
I was at a conference over the summer, and somebody had studied chief diversity officers in healthcare organizations and was looking at, what do we know about them? And people bring all sorts of different backgrounds. Sometimes they're attorneys. If it's within a healthcare organization, sometimes the physician who gets the role. But there's very little standardization. And there's this interesting tension. Do we want to have the degrees and the certifications and other things that might standardize it? Or for a while, might we want to have some direction, to the point that you were just making, but still let people be creative and feel things out for a while, and wait to really try to standardize until we explore how much space it can cover and what the scope might be. And then maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, ask, okay, do we need certifications and degrees, so that we then have a much clearer path for these people?
Yeah. 1,000%. I will so enjoyed this conversation thus far. I have one last question, and that is, what is your advice to those wanting to be DEI disruptors, whether they're new to the field, whether they're allies or diverse populations that are scared to speak up?
I'll take the first one. I mean, join a group that's working in something that you believe in. Certainly, the Johns Hopkins Health Equity Group is open. We love having new members. It's not just open to Johns Hopkins employees or alumni. Get in touch with us. Email me, ddpo@jhu.edu, and start learning about it. And I think we do a lot of actionable things. We certainly are very educational. We provide a lot of training and information. And from there, you could, again, be creative and see, well, what can I do in my community, at my workspace, things like that. Because, you can branch out from the Hopkins, because we're so diverse in terms of things that we talk about. And so just coming to these sessions every month could give you a lot of creative ideas as to what you could do to make a change, to move that needle to equity.
Yeah, and you don't have to jump in feet first. I think to your point earlier, health equity is huge, and there's lots of things that you can tackle, but you don't have to tackle them all at one time. So, find something. Health equity is in everything that we do, right? So wherever you go, the old thing, see who's not at the table and maybe bring that person with you the next time. Support someone in a meeting, in a conversation, who's might be being overtalked, or ignored, or somebody else is repeating what they said, and then that's a good idea, but when I said it wasn't so much. There are little things that you can do in the course of your day to help uplift and empower somebody else. read a book about something, take a course, join a group. But I think you don't have to dive in feet first. You can figure out how to put a toe in the water, and that's okay.
Coming over your house when we're done, Mary, just to hang out. Just so you know that, just when you see me walking up the sidewalk, I always do it. And so, I mean it though. The thing that I will say is, do your own work. You got to do your own work. I got to say that, but for having a chance to get a perspective on what internalized white supremacy and internalized racism had a grip on my life, really made a difference in me being able to do this work, to really heal the places where I had been hurt by it. But for doing the work on understanding what male privilege has done in my life, it gave me another perspective on how to do it. So the places, whether you're, privileged or target, whether it's my internalized gay oppression or my presumed male privilege, you got to do your own work here in order to show up authentically and thoughtfully in this space and to sustain yourself. So that's one of the pieces of advice I give.
Everything that's been, go ahead.
No, please go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say everything that's been said is amazing. But I think for me, two things that I think about. One, know your why. Why is this important to you? What is it that brings you to this? And remind yourself of that when the going gets tough. And the other thing is whether, however you're finding out about issues, pay attention to the details in the stories, because it's the details that reveal where there might be those first places you can take some action on things.
Kevin, I think you make a great point when you said recognize your why. It is so important to do that self-exploration on your own and really understand why it is that you do what you do, whether it be for or against the work, that we're doing. Why is that? That's something that you really do need to look at. And I would also say to believe people, give people a space to come forward when they do bring these things to your attention. Because I had a situation where I was essentially pushed out of a role, and somebody texted me and said, because I brought it up, that there was some lateral violence, some bullying, some implicit bias. There were some comments that were made that were derogatory and very offensive. And someone from the same organization texted me and said, if these things you are saying are true, then what? So if you want to be an upstander, I think it's important to, one, believe, and two, be supportive in that space as well.
So, one of the thoughts that goes through my mind all the time is this, that when we listen to others, see others, when we're observing through our own mental frameworks. And I've been privileged to live in several places and to work with so many different cultures that I've learned that if I try to assess them with my mental framework, I miss the point, because it's a very different place. And I think that's key to really understanding others and bringing them a lot, like if you're trying to create a place where people do feel belongingness, then that's got to go. It cannot be there is a prevalent culture of a certain people that dictates that place. It's got to be inclusive of others, and some of the things will not that you see from they may not fit with your frame, and they may not even be positively seen or highly regarded, but they are what they are. And as understanding somebody who comes from a different background is really important to being able to absorb them in and to have that belongingness or to give them that feeling of belongingness.
So I love everything that everybody's said. And I guess just to add to it, I am a believer that we're all so special, and we are all, put on this planet for a really special purpose. We all have our gifts, our talents, and things that make us unique. And it's starting from there, starting from your gift, starting from what makes you unique and using that to be a DEI disruptor. Not everybody is going to be loud and, on stages and traveling the world. Some people, sometimes it's just about speaking up for a colleague, in the workplace. Sometimes it's about, being a manager and changing certain systems that you see are discriminatory. Sometimes it's about, I'm a poet, so I write poetry about my experience. It starts with what your natural gifts and what your natural talents are. You don't have to put on something. Again, we're not fitting in, we're belonging in this space. So you don't have to put on something new or something different and something that doesn't look like you in order to be a DEI disruptor, but you can use what, you've already been naturally gifted with to make change in your society. So kind of as a segue to that, we do have some phenomenal things that these phenomenal people are doing, just a few of them. And again, we're going to have each of these DEI leaders on in a separate podcast for you to learn more about them and more about what they're doing, but some things to highlight. So Hopkins, they have their LGBTQ plus narratives. Kevin, did you want to talk about that really quickly?
Sure. There were interviews with 16 members of the LGBTQ plus community, and they took these half-hour interviews, got it down to 3 5-minute, very short synopsis videos focusing on allyship, empowerment, and just the overall experience. But the real focus was talking about it from an assets and strengths point of view, rather than what's wrong with life at this particular university for the LGBTQ plus community. So really focusing on how, again, while life is not perfect, things are going well, and the contributions that members of the community are making to the larger university.
Yes. And how about mental health for academics, Kevin? Do you have anything to say about that?
Sure, just very briefly, there's an organization called Dragonfly Mental Health, and really focusing on the importance of mental health issues for people in academia, given the prevalence of suicide in academia, really trying to get people to come to grips with the pressures that they face as they work their way towards a doctoral degree of some sort.
And Dr. Defoe, you have been in talks with NMA and ACGME. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I thought Dr. Frick, you have lots of hats in that space too. But certainly, so we've been having monthly meetings and trying to figure out how do we work collaboratively with training institutions where medical residents are trained. And so we know that federal funds are used to train medical residents. Every year, the federal government pays over $150,000 per resident in the US, I think something like that. And so CMS, Center for Medicare, Medicaid, so Medicare pays the highest portion of it, then the Veterans Affairs, then you have the Department of Defense, and Medicaid pays some of it also. So if you receive federal funds, you cannot discriminate at all. Race, sex, religion, country of origin. And so we have so much data in terms of residents who are being discriminated against and terminated. They're put on performance improvement plans or probation and then terminated right in the middle of residency, especially surgical residencies, especially Blacks. I mean, imagine being an orthopedic surgeon, which is a 5-year training, and after your 3rd year, you're terminated. That's a lot of federal funds being wasted. So we are trying to figure out how do we bring CMS and the VA and all these funders to the table and create an accountability system where we are more like the carrots, certainly not sticks trying to close down institutions, but how can we help them to support all residents? And so, I mean, it's certainly not something like the Flexner report, it's the opposite of that. So it's ongoing. Next month in November, we're meeting with CMS, and we would love for you to join. It's pretty interesting conversation. I know Dr. Fleming is there, and I think we're going to have some great results. I can see the outcome already.
And I plan on being there next month, Dr. Defoe.
You are on the mailing list, correct?
Not yet, but we'll work on that. And then last but not least, I really have the amazing privilege of being able to be a part of Harvard's Leadership Development to Advance Equity in Healthcare course that's led by Dr. Fleming. And so, Dr. Fleming, could you talk more about that?
Sure. I'm so excited to have you this year as well. So it's a virtual program, like you said, housed at the Harvard TH School of Public Health. It'll be November 1st through 4th, and it's really a program that's designed to help healthcare leaders transition in the health equity space. And so I tell people we're not teaching health equity, so you have to be primed in the subject matter, but it's really trying to help you figure out how to get to the next level for those who have been thrust into the new DEI offices and need some framework and some structure. This will help with that. But it also helps to build collaboration amongst the cohort itself. As we've talked about, sometimes you might be the only one out there. So this is a space where you can build friends across the country. And it's actually, we have some international students as well, to understand what they're doing, have somebody to learn from peer to peer, but also have people to lean on after the program is over. So we have a very heavy hitting faculty from inside of the Harvard faculty and outside. So I think it's only the second year, but we've had overwhelming support for this year. So I'm looking forward to it being a good program. So, and like Dr. Defoe said, she did it last year. She gave a testament that we did all right. We're looking forward to a second set of cohort this year.
It was inspiring. Thank you.
Yes, I am so excited to be able to, partner with you guys on that and be able to be a part of it. I'll be talking about, process improvement, the process behind DEI, and how we take a more strategic, data-driven, process-driven approach to DEI. And then just to kind of wrap up, I just want to mention that this podcast is powered by The Clinic Doctor, which I am the CEO of. The Clinic Doctor, again, is a process improvement consulting firm that focuses on putting process to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion with a specialization in healthcare. If you guys want to learn more about us, you can always check us out on clinicdoctorconsulting.com. I love working with all these leaders, and I'm so excited to meet, anybody else who wants to work with us. So last but not least, how can everybody get in touch with you guys? We can start with Kevin, or like your social media channels. How do people keep up with what you're doing?
So I do put stuff on LinkedIn. There's only so many Kevin Fricks on LinkedIn, so I'm not too hard to find. Especially at Johns Hopkins, and on Twitter, I'm at Prof Kevin Frick, all one word crammed together.
Awesome. And Dr. Masood?
Well, the email, the LinkedIn, and the Twitter are all Rashad Masood. The email is at outlook.com. The Twitter is at Rashad Masood, and LinkedIn, Rashad Masood. So easy to find.
Awesome. Dr. Fitzpatrick? Oh, you're on mute.
I keep doing that.
It's okay.
I am Dr. Kristen Fitzpatrick on LinkedIn, and it's FITCHPATRIC, no K. And I'm also Dr. DR_FITCH on Instagram.
How about you, Rudy?
Simplest thing is Rudy at evolution.team. Everything.
Okay. And Dr. Defoe?
Well, LinkedIn is the best for now, and it's my first name, which is DEI, DRE. I'm the only Deidre Defoe on LinkedIn, I believe, spelled that way. And actually, my husband told me tonight, DEI, your first name starts with diversity. So, join me on LinkedIn. I normally put, some pretty interesting posts up. So, looking forward to having you on my LinkedIn.
Awesome. And how about you, Dr. Fleming?
Last but not least, so I'm there. Unlike you, there are lots of Mary Flemings in the world, but if to look for me, if you put my middle initial in there, that usually gets it. So Mary, middle initial Fleming, Fleming, 1M, no S. And LinkedIn will probably get you to all the other places. So Read Scholars has its own website. We have our own podcast, Read Scholars Live, as well as Kayaba Care is on my LinkedIn page. So most things associated with me are on LinkedIn.
Oh, and Dr. Fleming, what's your middle initial?
E is in Elizabeth.
Oh, E as in Elizabeth. Okay. Well, I just want to say a big thank you to all of our guests today. I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast. And more than anything, I'm grateful to know each of you. And I hope you guys come back for next week's episode. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the DEI Disruptors, where we have a new positively disruptive episode here for you every first and third Tuesday of the month. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode. To do so, let's connect on LinkedIn. You can always find me at Britney, Britney, Scott, Scott, MD, LSSBB. And if you want to learn more about the Clinic Doctor, feel free to reach out at clinicdoctorconsulting@gmail.com or through our website, www.clinicdoctorconsulting.com. See you in 2 weeks.